Good evening, everybody. So, going to do a quick rundown of the most important events of today and somewhat of the week. And then this weekend, in a few days, what I'm doing right now with some very skilled researchers, doing a deep dive on Anthony Blinken. You might have saw the podcast I did with my buddy Chris a few weeks ago about Anthony Blinken, how he's the new Henry Kissinger. At the time, we were doing that in large part just out of our own curiosity, but shit, it's more relevant now than ever before. I'm of the belief that Biden has very little to do with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now. I think it's Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and people above them, people in that faction that are pushing us into this war. The reason could be anything from defense contractor money, them trying to create chaos since Trump is an incoming president and they want to, I don't know, create an emergency maybe to divert whatever they expect to happen to them once Trump wins. But something very dark and strange is happening right now, and I'm connecting the pieces right now behind the scenes. So I will have that for you this weekend. But until then, going to do a quick rundown of today. So first, if you haven't seen it already, MSNBC did something wild to the point where now Elon Musk feels compelled to potentially buy MSNBC. So you saw the tragedy of what happened with Laken Riley, and the other day, her attacker, the person who murdered her, got sentenced. But look at what MSNBC wrote today. So they write this article that everybody was freaking out about, rightfully so. From Yahoo, MSNBC on Friday changed its headline to a story on Laken Riley because it triggered people, and rightly so. The original headline was, quote, Laken Riley's killer never stood a chance. And they changed it to, quote, the guilt of Laken Riley's killer was never in doubt. Story was posted a day after Jose Ibarra, 26-year-old Venezuelan gangster who entered the U.S. illegally, was found guilty of murdering Riley in February. Ibarra was found guilty on additional 9 charges, including kidnapping, aggravated assault with intent to rape, and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The outlet's first headline was skewed by many on social media, including Joe Rogan, Utah Cycli, Arizona Rep Andy Biggs, and others, called it sickening, next level depravity, and pure trash. So here is the article, the now changed headline from MSNBC. So this MSNBC article reads as, Ibarra was convicted on multiple counts of murder Wednesday in the February killing of Georgia nursing student Laken Riley. Ibarra was immediately sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, along with other consecutive sentences for lesser crimes, including aggravated assault with intent to rape and peeping Tom. Riley's murder became a political rallying cry this summer, National Republican Convention, because Ibarra entered the country illegally in 2022. But for all political controversy, the outcome of this trial was never in doubt. Of course it was never in doubt, you psycho. For the defense, this was a hopeless case. The defense did the best it could with bad facts. It almost surely knew it was going to lose. That's probably why it requested a bench judge only instead of a trial jury. General defense attorneys preferred jury trials to bench trials. One reason is math. With a jury, it takes only 1 out of 12 to deadlock and avoid a conviction. With a judge, there's only one juror, so those chances decrease by 11. So just stop right there. Why are you writing this article? Like, they really feel this way, or are they suffering badly with their ratings to the point where they're almost worthless? But are they doing this to get attention? Because, yeah, it got attention today, but the bigger question is, do you actually feel this way? Like, are you, like, crazy thing about what's going on with the far left side? You know, first it was this hyper feminist movement, hyper, rights movement, but there's a confliction, like, act very anti-America and, attack white people for whatever reason. But historically, they're always very protective of women, but now you have a illegal immigrant who they stand up for, and then this person's killing a woman. So it's like they're doing their best effort to take the side of the person who killed an American citizen. This guy, I was looking at him before, he's Cavellos. He's just some lawyer, not really a big deal or anything, but I just can't wrap my head around this. Like, I can't even fathom doing what this girl's parents did the other day. Like, they stand 10 feet away from the person who brutally murdered their daughter. And I mean, him going to jail for life isn't even enough. Like, knowing that our taxpayers or the tax dollars are going to pay for this guy to live in a moderately comfortable setting for the rest of his life and feed him and allow him to bathe, allow him yard time. Like, be completely honest. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Law Abiding Citizen, but like, is what I would want to happen to a person like this. Like, of course, death penalty should occur for anybody who commits this type of a crime who entered the country illegally. Like, huge waste of money to spend money on keeping people like this alive. Like, if we just have money to spend, like, sure, just completely black and white against the death penalty. I don't understand it. Like, it's funny too, because people who are vehemently against the death penalty are the ones who are the most pro-abortion. Like, I don't get about being far left or far right. Like, there's always a time where your opinion doesn't make sense if you're all the way in on one side or the other side. Like, a lot of Republicans would say death penalty in most case scenarios. A lot of liberals would say death penalty is never okay. But then Republicans say abortion's never okay, and liberals say abortion's always okay. So how are you going to vehemently advocate for protecting the life of a brutal murderer, but you have no problem taking the life of the most innocent life possible, an unborn child? That is crazy, and that doesn't make sense. Anyway, MSNBC is a disgrace. It's disgusting. I think they're worth less than $1 billion now. It sounds like Elon Musk might consider buying it, but crazy thing I heard today. So Joy Reid, she got paid from $30 million a year to $25 million a year. I did not know she was making $30 million a year. Did you know she only has one show per week? So she's getting paid $30 million per year to do one show per week. So 52 shows. She's getting paid about $600,000 or $700,000 per show. Her ratings aren't that crazy. They're nothing special. Like, there are 5 people on Fox who outrank her. A lot of people on YouTube outrank her in views. Like, this is I mean, you know what though? That big pharma, because the only thing that creates revenue for mainstream media, cable news, is big pharma ads. Like, oh my God, if we made pharmaceutical advertising illegal, that would be a death blow to all these talking heads on mainstream media, cable TV. Like, they should not. She's not worth $30 million. She's not worth $3 million. I don't think she's worth $1 million. But anyway, I hope that's one of the many drastic measures that Trump takes, because these things are connected. The reason that something like cable TV is able to exist is because we have this weird situation where pharmaceutical companies are allowed to give money to mainstream media cable networks to, pump their channels and their advertisers or they're full of big pharma crap. So two policy recommendations as a result of this. One, always death penalty for somebody who's an illegal immigrant that commits a crime like this. Always, no questions asked. And quite honestly, it shouldn't be quick either. It should be something brutal, like something that scares the hell out of anybody from thinking about doing something like this. You gotta think, a lot of people, they aren't necessarily terrified about the notion of jail. Like, if you have nothing, being in jail is not much different from being homeless. And just the way this guy was sitting in jail, like the way this guy was sitting in the courtroom, blank, didn't even shed a tear, didn't even look remorseful, and he's just taking it as the parents are like, oh man, I don't know if you watch this thing, but painful to listen to. And then there's the tape of it actually happening to the girl, to Laken Riley, because she called 911 when it was happening and the whole thing was recorded. Oh my God. And then, like, what are you thinking, dude? Danny Savalos, what are you thinking? Next, the ICC issues an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Israel, and his former defense minister. I thought that a certain group of people in the world, or had a lot of influence over the world, and that this certain group of people would be fairly close with Benjamin Netanyahu for certain reasons. I was shocked to see this. I mean, because let's talk in code for a second. Cannot be too direct here. If you want to have a direct, uncensored, not walking on eggshells type of conversation, click on the link below for the Forbidden Book Society. That's where we have these uncensored conversations. But I always wonder, we know there's this committee, this group, this network that's full of elites that run the world, right? We also know that there's a lot of influence amongst a certain group of people that have things in common with Benjamin Netanyahu, which is why Israel's done so well for itself since its creation. So people who I would expect to support Netanyahu, are they at odds with the global network of elites? Or I always imagined they were intertwined because they're both sort of working for a weird socialist dictatorship from what I've gathered. So two possibilities here, the way I see it. Either his people have turned against him because he was in some hot water before this whole war popped off and kind of delayed that. So either they've turned on him, or group of supporters is at odds with the global group of supporters. Right? That's the big mystery. That's the $1 million question. Are those two separate entities, or are they the same thing? Because I don't know. I have a tough time imagining that the ICC goes ahead and does a bold move like this without the, go ahead from the global elite. And here's a gist of this article. It basically says the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Gaza conflict. This unprecedented move against a leader of a Western-aligned democracy could isolate Israel further on the global stage. When have you ever heard those words? Like a U.S. president has a tough time going against Israel. So how is the ICC suddenly able to go against Israel? Warrants complicate travel for Netanyahu and Gallant, who risk arrest in the court's 124 member countries. The arrest warrant for Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was initiated by Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the ICC. And so the way the ICC works, if I could remember my national security studies correctly, is that there's a rotating shift. I think every 3 years there's a new president of it. And this guy, Karim Khan, is prosecutor. So I think he's like number 2 in command, like basically the AG, ICC. And he's the UK. Guys, since the beginning of Israel, like the UK and Israel are locked and loaded at the hip. This is weird. This is really, really weird. Charges as a win attacking civilians. Criticism has also targeted Hamas, with warrants issued for leaders Mohammed Deif and others though several were killed by Israel forces. The warrants may deepen the global shunning of Israeli academics, defense firms, and officials. Some European countries signal readiness to enforce the warrants, while others, like Germany, hesitate due to political and historical sensitivities. The U.S., which is not an ICC member, opposes the move, with President Biden and officials linked to President-elect Trump sharply criticizing the court. Israel continues to assert its right to self-defense and compliance with international law, highlighting the complexities of balancing global legal norms and geopolitical realities. Okay, so that's interesting. When did the U.S. was the U.S. ever part of the ICC? All right, so here's the history of the U.S. and the ICC. So the U.S. has never been a full member of the International Criminal Court. While the U.S. signed the Rome Statute, the treaty establishing the ICC in 2000 under President Bill Clinton, nice bill, it did not ratify the treaty, meaning it is not legally bound by its provisions. In 2002, President George W. Bush formally withdrew the U.S. signature, citing concerns over the court's jurisdiction and potential for politically motivated prosecutions against American military personnel and officials. Okay. Key points about the U.S. and ICC. Signatory status, the U.S., blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what happens when the U.S. and ICC is differently? Like, what if a country arrests the United States against the will of Israel? So what if a country arrests Netanyahu against the will of the United States? How does that look? Oh, shocker. Main drivers between the formation of the ICC were groups like the United Nations. But again, that leads back to the question, like, we know nations bad. The elite group that has things in common with Benjamin Netanyahu bad. Is it the same thing? Because again, I mean, if you look at like the Rothschild series I'm talking about, coordinated effort for tendencies and socialist tendencies by both of these groups. And like, that's the thing. Are both these groups one, or are they two different things? And I bet 50% of you know what I'm speaking about. If you know what I'm speaking about, I mean, go watch the Rothschild series in the playlist, The Men Who Broke America, or join the Forbidden Book Society, the links below. But that is the question that I am dying to know. Like, are those two competing power factions? Like, is there a global and then a, Jewish cabal, or are they the same thing? I don't have an answer to that yet. I'm trying to figure that out. The U.S. fundamentally rejects the ICC's arrest warrant and is working with Israel on a response. Biden calls the move outrageous, and Trump's NSA pick vows strong reaction to the court's anti-Semitic bias as some lawmakers urge sanctions through Tlaib, says decision long overdue. This guy. The White House said Thursday that it fundamentally rejects International Criminal Court's decision to issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes in Gaza. Some lawmakers, including President-elect Donald Trump, pick National Security Advisor. Yep, same thing I just said. Hey, one Republican senator hinted that the U.S. should invade The Hague in retaliation for the warrants. Quote, let me be clear. Once again, whatever the ICC might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas. While we will always stand with Israel against threats to its security, U.S. President Joe Biden said in his first statement responding to the ICC decision, which he denounces as outrageous. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that the U.S. would not execute the arrest warrants and called the ICC move a flawed process. Oh, geez. In contrast to how ICC chief prosecutor has treated others, including Nicolas Maduro and his associates, the prosecutor failed to provide Israel with a meaningful opportunity to engage and constructively and to properly consider its domestic process, she said. This calling into question the credibility of the prosecutor and his investigation, she added. By contrast, Michigan Representative Rashid Tlaib, a member of the ultra-progressive squad, Democrats and only Palestine American member of Congress, welcomed the ICC's long overdue decision, saying it signals that the days of Israel apartheid government operating within impunity are ending. Oh, shut up. The warrants effectively bar Netanyahu and Gallant from entering the ICC's 124 member states. Israel and the U.S., neither of which are members of the court, have slammed the motion to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant. All right, so the Vegas odds on a world war are just going up exponentially by the day. Haha. Gotta laugh at these things because they're quite concerning. Speaking of world war, let's head on over to what's going on in Russia, because Russia yesterday said they used a new missile they've never used before to strike Ukraine. So let's see. From Bloomberg, Ukraine said Russia had launched a new kind of ballistic missile at the city of Dnipro in the latest escalation of hostiles and an alarming signal to Kiev Western backers. The weapon was an experimental intermediate-range ballistic missile, Russia and the U.S. said. It was based on the RS-26 Rubish intercontinental ballistic missile. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh said, oh, she's a disaster. Ooh, so here we go. Nice little Bloomberg map. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the weapon had all the parameters of ICBM. This is an obvious and serious increase in the scale and brutality of this war, Zelensky said on Telegram. All right, dude, but like you're escalating yourself. I'll get into why this is such an outrage in a second. But hold on. So President Vladimir Putin said that the weapon used was a new intermediate-ranged ballistic missile with a conventional warhead. So the Russian launched missile came from this blue right here and hit this area. No. Okay, so it hit right here. And this is Russian occupied territory. So this is 300 miles right here, this bar. So looks like maybe that's about 500 miles that it went. And they said that this thing went, they said 10 mark, which I think they said was like 2,100 miles per second. So pretty fast. It means it go from here to here in like a second. If it's a few thousand miles per second, yeah, yep. Unless this is meters and kilometers. No, it'd still be like a two. In televised remarks, Putin said that in retaliation for use of American and British-made missiles on Russian territory earlier this week. So the thing that's so crazy about what's happening with the America giving Russia or giving Ukraine these missiles is that we're not just giving them to them. We are helping them coordinate the locations that they have to hit because they aren't capable of executing these long-range missiles by themselves. They need our intelligence and our guidance to do it. We are completely in this war, and they try to say like, oh, American boots aren't on the ground. Yes, they are. Private contractors from America are very much on the ground. They have been since 2022. So we are full on in this war. And by the way, like I said at the beginning, the big question to answer here is what the hell is the outcome they want? Like is this the way they're trying to reduce the world's population by 75%? Be that stupid where they like the talking point you keep hearing is that, well, Putin hasn't used the nuke yet. Why would he use the nuke now? Like because you're fucking going harder with what you're doing. You're escalating. So you don't escalate? You really want to call that bluff? For what? For Ukraine? For Ukraine? Those weapons have ranges of only a few hundred miles. However, the Allies inside Russia after it deployed thousands of North Korean troops in the fight against Ukraine's forces. Oil, gold, and wheat rose Thursday after Kiev first reported the strike. Russia notified the U.S. of the planned launch shortly before the missile took off, though nuclear took off through nuclear risk reduction channels, the Pentagon spokeswoman said, from Ashkesan region by the Caspian Sea in a distance of around 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles as a part of a larger barrage targeting central Ukraine earlier on Thursday. According to officials in Kiev, quote, this is a very powerful message from Putin, said Ruslan Pukov, head of Moscow-based Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies. It is a very calculated move, and it does not require retaliation by the U.S. The U.S. had warned Ukraine and its other allies that Russia might use the experimental weapon, an American official said, asking not to be identified, discussing matters that aren't public. The official said Moscow had used missiles with significantly larger warheads in previous attacks. Oh, okay, so that makes it better. One of the systems Ukraine could ask for is the Thermal Altitude Area Defense System produced by Lockheed Martin Corp, spokeswoman said. Since the start of the war, Ukraine has persuaded its Western allies to provide the country other advanced air defense systems, including the U.S.-made Patriot batteries. Despite initial hesitation on the part of its allies, Putin has lowered the threshold for the use of Moscow's nuclear arsenal as President Joe Biden reversed the course and allowed Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied ATACMs, long-range missiles, to strike Russia. Ukraine also used UK-made Storm Shadow missiles against Russian targets. Like, this is so crazy. Like, we weren't escalating this much during the Cold War, not once. And everybody was like, we were doing drills in school. Not that I was alive, but they were doing drills in school where they would get under their desk because they thought the desks would protect them from nuclear weapons at that time. But like, they were that ready for nuclear weapons. And now we're just like, people are arguing about transbites instead of the fucking nuclear war. What? So, craziest thing about this, I have to give some backstory quick. Like, anybody who doesn't think that we fully wanted this war, listen to these details, guys. Cold War, like 30 years, right? More than that. It goes from the end of World War II, was like to 1991. So what's that? 55 years. Like, the biggest nightmare for the military complex is that we stop having a war with anybody. So, like, as World War II is ending, like, at military infrastructure, I'm sure most of you see Dwight Eisenhower's big farewell address speech said, the greatest threat we face is the greatest threat we face is the military industrial complex, that they have more control over America and the direction this country goes than pretty much anybody else because of the power they amassed during World War II, because we were just pumping money into them. Like, this is an entity that did not exist, barely existed before World War II. And that becomes this big, thriving thing that is bloodthirsty. It needs blood, death, destruction to survive. So, a lot of people think that General Patton mysteriously died, and his biggest thing is that he said, why the hell are we stopping at Germany? Russia's just as big of a threat, if not bigger, or the USSR back then. Like, we strategically aligned with those communist, evil scumbag USSR Bolsheviks for like like, I think that was a mistake. People argue that they were a bigger threat than the Germans. Yeah, 30 million people died inside of Russia. Not from the war. That was another extra 20 million, but 30 million people died from his purges. Very sick, twisted guy. And not just evil in the sense of killing his own domestic citizens, but trying to spread communism throughout the world, which is evil by nature, anti-God by nature. So, not to get off track, General Patton wanted to keep on going because, like, by the end of World War II, we had built a monster inside the U.S. Like, we had 60% we accounted for 60% of all the world GDP. We had like 90% of all the gold in the world in America. Humming. We are a big, strong, powerful war machine. Could have went to war with the entire world just by like the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was literally a strategic decision for us to pour money into Europe and let Europe tariff America and we tariffs on them so that we could basically harm ourselves to give them strength. Like, it was like a blood transfusion. Like, we were a young, healthy athlete and they were like a shriveled up old person. We gave them a blood transfusion. We were that well off. So that Russia was this big built up military machine by the end of that, but we could have went in there. We could have crushed Russia. And let me look this up quick. When did Russia develop the nuclear weapon? Because I'm going to lose it because, if they didn't have military capabilities at the end of World War II and we did, why the fuck did we not invade them and crush the Union? What? This is going to piss me off. Russia successfully tested its first nuclear weapon August 1949. Soviet scientists received critical intelligence from spies such as Klaus Fuchs, who worked on the Manhattan Project in the U.S. and passed nuclear secrets to the Soviets. Was Klaus Fuchs a U.S. citizen? Oh, this piece of shit. This piece of shit. But I've gotten so cynical that, hold on, born in Germany. Awards, Order of Karl Marx. What? Hold on. I ChatGPT'd this, right? Russia create nuclear weapon. Russia, then the Soviet Union, successfully tested its first nuclear weapon called RDS-1, or First Lightning, on August 29th, 1949. This event marked the Soviet Union's entry into the nuclear arms race during the Cold War. The design of RDS-1 was heavily influenced by espionage activities that provided the Soviets with detailed information about the U.S. Manhattan Project. So, key points from this is that Soviet scientists received critical intelligence from U.S. spies such as Klaus Fuchs, who worked on the Manhattan Project. Weapon detonated, blah, 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 Kazakhstan, bomb kilotons. Okay, we got it. Ended U.S. monopoly on nuclear weapons. So look at this shit. Look at what happens when I look this up. Ready? This is weird. This is weird. Was the guy who leaked secrets to... Oh, actually, you know what? It makes sense because he's a communist and Soviet Union liked communists. Maybe it was like Peace Prize Award. So this is the guy who leaked our secrets to the Soviet Union to give him a nuclear weapon. Born in Germany and won the Order of Karl Marx. Let's see what this thing's all about. Order of Karl Marx was a prestigious award in the German Democratic Republic that was established in May 1953 to commemorate Karl Marx's 135th birthday. What? This is a weird rabbit hole. I did not know this. Why is Germany giving out Karl Marx awards? Is it because they were occupied by Russia? Is this East Germany? Germany. Established May 5th, 1953 to commemorate Karl Marx's 135th birthday. The award was given to individuals, organizations, and enterprises, military groups, and citizens of other countries for exceptional merit in the areas of culture, economy, and other distinctions. Some recipients, do you recognize any of these names? Not really. Okay. Then we got, what was the next thing I was going to ask? What was the next thing I was going to ask? So, okay, so where was this guy a citizen? Was Klaus a U.S. citizen or was he a German citizen? Was he a Russian citizen? Where was Klaus Fuchs a citizen? All right, so obviously, Germany fled to UK in 1933, fled Nazi Germany due to his opposition to Adolf Hitler and membership in the Communist Party. That piece of shit, communist fuck. Naturalized British citizen during his time working on nuclear research in the UK, Fuchs became a naturalized British citizen In 1950, he was convicted of espionage after being exposed as a spy for the Soviet Union. Fuchs was stripped of his British citizenship and later emigrated to East Germany after serving his prison sentence. So when did he get out of prison? And I started saying this before. I'm getting so cynical and skeptical that I would almost venture to ask, did this guy, was he given the means to leak this information on purpose because we needed a proper threat to justify the Cold War? Because think about the position we were in. Think about the position of the military contract, the defense contractors. You know, you grow this empire in this 5-6 year stretch where you go from like this tiny little ding truck making company to a massive powerhouse companies in the world. And your gravy train runs out and there's not an existing threat. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show, The Boys, about the superheroes. Pretty sick show. It's like how I think superheroes would realistically act. But anyway, the like whole premise of it is that they're trying to win military contracts on a, you know, basically rake in all the defense dough and like fight on behalf of the U.S. military. So the U.S. military starts saying like, oh, no, screw you, you're unstable, we don't need you. So in the show, the way that they got their powers, the thing called like compound V. It's like this pharmaceutical stuff that they inject into, it gives you superpowers, whatever. So when the military rejects them, they smuggle compound V over to the Middle East and give some, you know, towelhead military guys this compound V stuff, and then all of a sudden they have superheroes or supervillains popping off the Middle East. And then, of course, the military comes running over to them saying, all right, yeah, we need your help to fight the bad guys who have superpowers now in the Middle East. They got compound V somehow. And they're like, oh, really? They do? Okay, fine, we'll help you. So there was really a justification for the Cold War until Russia had a nuclear weapon. So this is just speculation of 0% looked at this topic, but my gut instinct, and it's very rarely wrong. My gut instinct tells me that it's not implausible that the U.S. was actively for Russia to get nuclear capabilities behind the scenes, because once that started probably raking in the dough. Like, I think the Cold War started basically right away when Russia got nuclear weapons. But the weave, the weave. So General Patton, he said from the jump, do not stop at Germany. Let's keep going. We are not friends with Russia. They're going to be a problem. Stalin, evil. We can exist. But of course, Russia was weak at that point, and powers that be knew that we would have wiped them out, clean slate. And that probably pretty scary to them if all you care about is winning defense contracts and going to war and spending money on global conflicts, because if we took out the threat, then we really would have had world supremacy and probably world peace to a degree, except for a few small threats here and there. So Patton is the hero of World War II. Everybody loves him, was a shoo-in to be the presidential candidate and to win if he wanted to. Like, he was much more popular than Eisenhower. But he mysteriously dies in a car accident, and the person who crashes into him isn't arrested, isn't found. There's no toxicology report. All kinds of weird inconsistencies, like the angle the car came from shouldn't have been going that fast to hit General Patton, et cetera. And he's not even killed in the car crash. He's almost nearly fatally wounded, but he's impaired. He's in the hospital, and then strangely dies one day when they ended up expecting him to live. So I say that to say that it seems as if we slammed on the brakes when we got to Germany in World War II, that there was not any interest at all in charging ahead, taking out Russia, because we wanted to consolidate, regroup, and maybe slip them some nuclear codes or some nuclear information so they could have their own threat. And then we have, 40 years of Cold War spending? Let's see. How much did you spend on the Cold War? Wow. Holy shit. I did not expect this number. What? Is this adjusted for inflation? I said, how much did the U.S. spend on the Cold War, right? Oh my God. $8 to $10 trillion in the Cold War spent between 1945 and 1991. Let's see, was this adjusted for inflation? Figures include military expenditures, foreign activities, space exploration, the development of nuclear weapons delivery systems, breakdown of major costs. Yeah, military, nuclear arsenal. Developing and maintaining the nuclear arsenal accounted for $5.8 trillion. Oh my God. Marshall Plan, proxy wars. Is this number adjusted for inflation? Okay, so it says yes. What was the actual number? Oh, just 3 trillion. Don't worry. Okay, so you know how the Cold War plays out. It's a whole series of spy games from the 40s until the 90s, and then like that wasn't nearly as big of a threat the entire time. Like they're a much bigger boogeyman than it ever was because they wanted to spend this $10 trillion to enrich the hands of a small few. But what's really crazy is that once the only threat in the world to us, the Soviet Union, collapses, 1990, or hold on, this whole time Germany's being held hostage, half of it. You know, Russia, USSR got the east half of Germany, we got the west half, and we're saying to them, what do you want? We want Germany back. What's going to take? And the guy said, what if we promise you that we will not, if you give us back Germany, we will not expand NATO 1 inch past Germany's border if you give us back the rest of Germany. And Gorbachev, I believe, was the president for USSR at the time, said, you know what, fine, we'll do that. Let's do it. Then a year later, Soviet Union collapses and we start expanding NATO. But the most outing of this all is that Gorbachev wanted to join NATO. The president after him wanted to join NATO. Putin was open to the idea of joining NATO. Like, why? Well, I ask why rhetorically, but when the Cold War ended, major military cuts. Let's ask ChatGPT that question too. How significant were the military spending cuts at the end of the Soviet Union? How significant were the cuts in spending after Soviet Union collapse? I will share this screen so you could see my ChatGPT search. I don't know about you, but I kind of prefer ChatGPT to Google now. Well, I kind of use it like as Google. Military budget cuts after collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 were significant, reflecting a major peace dividend as the U.S. Cold War ended. Defense spending decreased markedly throughout the reductions in both sides of the armed spending on programs. The key highlights: U.S. military peaked at $604 billion adjusted for inflation in 1989. By 1980, it dropped approximately $380 billion. Wow, that right there is why we've been doing this to Russia. Why we're trying to expand NATO. Oh my God. In just 9 years after the military industrial complex has been raking it in for the last 50 years, in a 9-year period after Soviet Union collapsed, the defense budget dropped by 37%. Okay. Poof. So this is right around the time where we start really expanding NATO because I show this chart all the time. I'll show the chart quick because I feel like I have to now. Let's see. This is all starting to make sense. It made sense to me, but it's starting to make sense like in a way where I know it's making sense to you. All right, so this happens, and then what's the solution when you have a 40% budget cut? You start arming other countries. So look right here, the late 90s, early 2000s. All this blue. Guys, this is Germany. We said we wouldn't go an inch past this right here, this border. Then we did all this. Then finally got to Ukraine. Like, we're bordering Russia with NATO in some of these spots already. And then right here, that was the line. So, like, why are we surprised that Putin ended up invading? Like, we're throwing stones, lying, deceiving, overthrowing Ukraine's president because his president didn't want to join NATO. In 2014, we overthrow Ukraine's government and installed our own puppet president. Why do we overlook that? I mean, I know a lot of you know this, but out there who say, oh, we just have to do whatever it takes to defend Ukraine. Like if you're going around wearing a Ukraine pin, you're either getting a shit ton of defense contractors or you're fucking retarded. Like, the degree to which people are susceptible to brainwashing, and then they act shocked that people acted crazy at times in history because of brainwashing, whatever. But yeah, so you see what happened here. So it seems like we've been wanting to do this for a long time. It seems like they always have, I guess, something. And then there's like a quiet time in between the So the stuff in the Middle East, that was a way to not make it necessarily against nuclear power, because we definitely spent 12 trillion in the Middle East, but like these are the people that put us in the debt that we're in, and what did we get for it? Like, think of all the progress that we missed out on. And not to mention, I don't know if you guys saw Stephen Greer when he was on the PBD podcast. That was probably my favorite episode ever, talking about the Invention Secrecy Act. These people who lobby for that stuff, like when somebody creates something crazy, it's people who grab it and hide it. Like, you hear about UFOs and stuff. If anybody in the world has UFOs, it's defense contractors. I just hate wasted potential more than anything. And like, this is probably the most glaring example of wasted potential I've ever seen in my life. Trillions of fucking what? Like, people talk about reparations. How about a reparation from the defense contractors to us for all the wasted money? Like, collectively, they probably have a few $1 trillion worth of market cap. And then, the second you do that, terrorist attacks would start happening because they protect us from all that. Like, fuck off. Unreal. But you know what, though? It's okay. Even though we're so close to nuclear war, people are still being passionate about the right things. Here's a prime example about that. I don't know what could make this point clearer than this right here.
I dare you to try and stop me from going into a women's bathroom. It will be the last mistake you ever make. I dare you to try and stop a transgender woman in my presence from using the bathroom. It will be the last mistake you ever make. This is a call to action and a call to arms to everybody within the United States that are scared, worried, have children that are transgender, lesbian, bi, or gay. This is a call to action. You need to arm up, plain and simple.
Okay.
Go out, buy a gun.
Okay.
Learn how to use it.
Okay.
Efficiently, through and through.
Okay.
Because the time to act is now.
Okay.
You need to protect yourself, and you need to protect your fellow transgender brothers and sisters and theys and thems. You need to protect the rest of us in the LGBT community, as I'm going to do myself.
So that's what a portion of people are worried about in the midst of us being closer to nuclear war than we've ever been. We're worried about that. And the big show over here is ready to fight somebody if they tell him that he can't go into a woman's bathroom. Fucking psychos, man. It's brainwashing. It's brainwashing. It's brainwashing. It's brainwashing. Jaguar doesn't think it's brainwashing, though. Let's see how Jaguar's doing with their new strategy. All right, so Jaguar had this fruity commercial. I don't even want to play it for you because it's so fruity, but you could see a case study from cdotimes.com. Jaguar's rebranding disaster, a lesson in failing the basics of marketing. When Jaguar teased its rebranding campaign earlier, the overwhelmingly negative, the iconic British luxury car manufacturer, a symbol of elegance and high performance engineering, now finds itself a target of ridicule rather than admiration. The problem, a promotional video that features neither cars nor a clear connection to the brand's heritage. Instead, it showcases models in outlandish, brightly colored outfits strutting through a surreal, alien-like landscape. The tagline, break molds, copy nothing, alienating the core audience. Jaguar's campaign set to coincide with the launch of their all-electric GT during Miami Art Week is an attempt to reposition the brand as bold, futuristic, and innovative. However, critics argue that the campaign erases Jaguar's legacy instead of leveraging it. As Charles Taylor, a marketing professor at Villanova University, aptly noted, they could build on their prior image as opposed to really throwing out their heritage of the brand and going in this kind of direction. Your call, but I scratch my head when watching this commercial. It feels like something Monty Python would have to come up with to ridicule an iconic Jaguar brand. Let's see if this is a... Oh boy, tranny. Yeah, that's insane. So CMO's a freak. I mean, I don't even want to play the video. Like, he was giving this whole speech about what is it? How they want to like enable everybody to be able to transition at work and equity and inclusivity, blah 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 blah. I mean, the UK is really got a weird direction, between being light on immigrants who stab people and arresting people who post about that on social media, and then Jaguar feels like they're positioning themselves better if they go in the traditional direction. Really makes you wonder what incentives are being pushed in the UK, because I think the forces that are pushing this initiative are pretty similar to the forces that are pushing us into the Ukraine war. And watch this. I'm gonna do the ultimate weave right here, right now. Ready? So I've spoken about a book before called The Committee of 300, right? Like a large network of all these organizations that are layers of power that all report to the same people. So there's one group, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House. Anthony Blinken was at the Chatham House just a few months ago, but this popped off, and they have a history of pushing the U.S. into wars against its will, according to the book Committee of 300 by former MI6 officer John Coleman. Margaret Thatcher was told by the RIAA, now Chatham House, to tell President Herbert Walker Bush to get his ass over to Iran, or excuse me, Iraq. So, according to this book, they pushed us into the Iraq War and many other wars. And the Tavistock Institute of Human Research was also a big part of this book. It's like the propaganda center. And earlier last year, there was a division. I'm going to show you both these articles. There was actually a division of Tavistock shut down for gender studies. Yes, I'm going to blow your mind right now. So here's one, right? So Tavistock Identity Clinic was forced to shut down. What happens next? All right. A report in this newspaper that sparked my real interest in Gidson made me ask what's going on. In November 2018, the article by Jamie Doward revealed the Gender Identity Development Service, to use its full title, was undertaking a review. The details were scarce, but a senior member of staff had claimed that the service was failing to examine fully the psychological and social reasons behind young people's desire to change gender. In the week that Gid's 35-year history had finally ended, I have been thinking about that time. How it set the scene of what would over the next few years and how things could have been so different. What if NHS England had acted when it saw of those concerns? It didn't, and the service remained open for another 6 years. Service which referred children for puberty blocking drugs without robust data to support that this was beneficial, and that shut down the concerns of a growing number of its own staff. Those professionals never questioned the identity of the young people they saw, nor the intensity of their distress. What they questioned was whether the NHS service they worked in was providing safe, evidence-based care for thousands of vulnerable children, or whether they might in fact be witnessing a medical scandal unfold. In February 2009, just a few months later, more details emerged in the Sunday Times, and then in the Observer, the senior staff member mentioned was Dr. David Bell, a highly respected psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. These weren't his claims and concerns per se, though he clearly shared them, but rather 10 members of the clinical staff from Gids had gone to him with their worries about the service, about how the service was operating. NHS whistleblowers are uncommon. To have 10 from one small clinic is unheard of. I didn't know if what they were saying was true, but the claims were extremely serious. I wanted to find out more, and that started a series of BBC Newsnight together, and where then colleague Deborah Cohen, and later in a book chronicling this extraordinary episode in NHS history. The clinicians had sought out Bell after repeatedly raising concerns within Gids and the wider Tavistock itself to no avail. They told him how the service was unable to cope. The number seeking its help had increased tenfold in just 5 years. There was enormous pressure to process referrals rapidly, or more bluntly, refer children onto endocrinologists who would prescribe puberty-blocking drugs. Oh my God, this is gross. This place is evil. Get the book, The Committee of 300. I have it right here. I have it on me at all times. It looks like this. Blue book, fucking crazy. There's whole sections on the Tavistock, and it mentions like 30 organizations. It says the chart in here. And Tavistock is one of the most referred to organizations in this book. It's basically the Center for Propaganda. Yeah. But I haven't looked into this too much, though. I found out about this a few weeks ago. It quietly earlier this year. I didn't find out about the Tavistock Institute like from the book until maybe 2 months ago when I started the Forbidden Book Society. Link below if you want to join. We talk about it in great detail there. But anyway, let's continue. Sometimes, though not often, this would happen just after an hour or two, staff said. Procedures for gaining consent to these potentially life-altering treatments were inadequate, and many of these children's staff explained were vulnerable. Many were autistic. Many had been bullied in some instances after coming out as gay. Most were unhappy. These children had complicated lives and sometimes had suffered horrendous abuse or trauma. But this wasn't always explored properly before referring them for medication. In a small minority of cases, it's difficult to properly convey just how troubled these children were. Some were nonverbal. Some could not read or write. Others even identified as another race. The official review that followed Bell's report didn't give Gids a clean bill of health, but the Tavistock Trust told the press that the service had been found to be safe and operating in line with the best practice of the field internationally. Oh my God, you sickos. The Trust's chief executive insisted that none of the concerns around safety or safeguarding were upheld by our medical director. This wasn't true, and the messaging underpinning the public statements was sympathetic of how the Trust was responding to the difficulties Gids was facing. The Tavistock told this newspaper in November 2018 that it was concerned by the tone and manner in which these allegations have been made, and that they revealed a negative attitude toward gender dysphoria and gender identity. Wow. So this, like, I cannot emphasize how much sense this makes, because the purpose of this group was to like create the optimal words and the optimal way to say things to like put trends into society. So according to this book, like they were responsible for the Beatles, they were responsible for trends and fads like within school, like glorifying the rebellious kid, like glorifying the like rebelling against your parents. So like when I was about this group in the book, I'm like, you know what they're describing here, because the book was written in the 90s. It sounds a lot like what happened or now with the messaging or this whole transitioning thing. So it actually was them. So anyway, first continuing, for some who had contributed to Bell's report, this confirmed what they had been saying all along, that if you raised concerns, you would face accusations of transphobia. That word wasn't used in the statement, but it's how staff interpreted it. When Bell's report was leaked, the Trust claimed that it presented hypothetical vignettes rather than actual case studies. This was also untrue. Some were so appalled by the statement that they resigned. Others who stayed at the Trust say that it sent a message: if you spoke out, you would be vilified. When in June 2020, Newsnight broadcast parts of the transcript of official interviews clinicians had held with Tavistock's medical director as part of the review, the Trust claimed didn't stand up. A sizable minority staff had in fact told him that Gids' model of care was unsafe and that some children were being harmed. At about the same time, legal proceedings against the Tavistock Trust questioned whether the children could properly consent to treatment with puberty blockers. Kira Bell, the lead claimant, was referred for drugs after just 3 or 4 appointments. She was also prescribed testosterone while under Gids' care. A double mastectomy followed via adult services, and aged 22, she regretted all of it. No alternatives have been explored by the service at the time, she said. The case was ultimately lost on appeal, but showed how over 30 years Gids had appeared to have collected no meaningful data on his patients or its core treatment pathway. It could not tell the court how many children had been referred for puberty blockers, how old they had been, what sex they were, or if they had gone on to take hormones. Change quickly followed Newsnight's broadcast and the start of litigation. In September 2020, the NHS England announced that pediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass would undertake an independent review of the gender identity services for children and young people. The Care Quality Commission, CQC, inspected Gids a month later and rated the service inadequate, and in a damning report, upheld most of the concerns clinicians had been raising for years. Contrary to the denials from the Tavistock, the CQC found examples of 2-session assessments. The Trust would later concede that 1-session assessment had also occurred too. The watchdog noted that Gids did not always adequately manage risk, that consent was not recorded routinely, and that some staff felt unable to raise concerns without fear of retribution. In some cases, it said, quote, there was no clear rationale for clinical decision-making. CAS's interim review published in February 22 marked the beginning of the end for Gids. The single specialist provider model is not safe or viable long-term option, she wrote. Fundamentally different service model was needed. One, children with complex needs were identified as having gender-related distress. Those other important healthcare issues were sometimes overlooked, she said. There were significant gaps in the research and evidence base, and Gids' clinical approach had not been subjected to some of the usual control measures that are typically applied with new or innovative treatments are introduced. The report explained CAS was referring diplomatically to NHS England allowing Gids to routinely refer children as young as 9 for puberty blockers from 2014 onward. Oh my God. Without insisting on any robust data to support the policy. This psycho was referring 9-year-olds for puberty blockers since 2014, from 2014 to at least 2019, according to this. Oh my God. On 2022, on July 28, 2022, the NHS England announced its intention to close Gids. It would be replaced initially by 2 non-regional services, one in London and the other in Northwest England. They would follow a very different model of care, offering more holistic treatment, a range of pathways, with the primary intervention being psychological support, not medication. NHS England confirmed on March 12 that puberty will be available going forward because there was not enough evidence to support their safety or clinical effectiveness. Blockers will not be prescribed on the NHS unless and until a research trial has been established. NHS had also updated its policy around hormones accordingly. Previously, someone could start hormones at around their 16th birthday, interpreted by Gids staff as 15 years old and 9 months. If only they had been on blockers for 12 months beforehand. Otherwise, they would have to wait for access to adult services. NHS's new policy, largely copy and pasted from the previous one, complete with out-of-date document references, confirm hormones will now be available without the need for prior treatment with puberty blockers. A new safeguarding measure has been introduced whereby a national clinician team will have to agree the young person meets all relevant criteria for the drugs. New policy will be reviewed from CAS's final recommendations, so may well be short-lived. The opening of the new youth gender service has been beset by delays. The aim was to have the first 2 clinics running by spring 2023. They will finally be open Monday, while a third being set up in Bristol area over time. Jesus. So is this the guy? Man. So the reason I wanted to show that to you is because Tavistock, according to this book right here, is responsible for setting basically the national narrative, like whether it's around COVID or like around elections or around wars. Like they're responsible for messaging around a topic to get the population on board with something. Like they're deeply, deeply effective at propaganda. So it's crazy that they were associated with this. Now, next crazy thing. Let me send this to myself. Actually, next thing, watch this. Anthony can chat some. So September 10th, 2024, Blinken goes to the Chatham House, which you probably haven't heard of before, but this real, like this might be a thing that tells America what to do, like higher up than the CFR, way higher up than the WEF, higher up than the Trilateral Commission. This thing is the real deal. So September 10th, Blinken goes there. United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visited Chatham House on Tuesday, September 10th. As part of his trip to the UK, Secretary Blinken joined Chatham House Director Browan Maddox and invited an audience to discuss Ukraine's long-term strategic success and how to bolster its capabilities militarily, economically, and diplomatically. Mr. Blinken traveled to Chatham House following his press conference with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy at the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in London. The event at Chatham House took place under Chatham House rule. What does that mean? Brown and Maddox said, "We were delighted to host Secretary Blinken at Chatham House. The event provided a platform for an in-depth discussion on U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine and an important moment as the war with Russia develops and as the U.S. presidential election campaign gets into full swing. Our thanks to Secretary of State for his time and insights." So it doesn't tell us what they spoke about. All right, let me see if I could get some goodies for you here. Give me 1 second. All right, so I put in ChatGPT, what does John Coleman say about the RIA? Because that's what the Chatham House used to be. Dr. John Coleman, a former intelligence officer, has extensively discussed the Royal Institute of International Affairs in his writings, particularly his book, Conspirator's Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300. Got it right here. If you want to know more about it, join the Forbidden Book Society in the link below. He asserts that the RIA, also known as the Chatham House, serves as a front organization for the Committee of 300, a group he alleges a significant influence over global affairs. Coleman claims the RIA issues directives through other entities, such as the Tavistock Institute, which in turn established organizations like the Club of NATO. He suggests these interconnected bodies work collectively to control political, economic, and social developments worldwide. I don't know if it's true or not, but he's a former intelligence officer. So let's see let me see how crazy this thing could get. Where'd my chat go? Did this group push U.S. into wars? John Coleman in his writings. Oh, here we go. Here we go. John Coleman in his writings, particularly the Committee of 300, claims entities like the RIA/Chatham House influenced U.S. foreign policy decisions, including involvement in wars. According to Coleman, these groups function as part of a larger network. Yep, we got that. Alleged influence on U.S. world wars. Coleman argues the RIA played a role in maneuvering the U.S. into both World War I and World War II by influencing policymakers and leveraging propaganda to align the public sentiment with interventionist policies. Sound familiar? Vietnam War. He suggests the organizations tied to the Chatham House helped escalate U.S. involvement more by fostering the Cold War narrative and pushing for the containment of communism, which benefited global elites. Middle Eastern conflicts. Coleman links the RIA/Chatham House and related groups to U.S. engagements in the Middle East, asserting that these wars served broader geopolitical goals, such as securing energy and maintaining control over strategic regions. General mechanisms. He claims the Chatham House and similar bodies use think tanks, media influence, and covert operations to guide U.S. policymakers into actions that align with global elites' agenda, often at the expense of national sovereignty and public interests. Covert operations, you mean like blowing up a pipeline and making European energy prices go up by 200%? Critical perspective. Let's see what ChatGPT's critical perspective is. While Coleman's theories have gained attention in conspiracy and alternate research circles, they remain controversial and are not widely accepted by mainstream historians or political scientists. Well, let's just end what we're saying right there, because totally trust those people. Critics argue that his claims often lack concrete evidence and overstate the influence of specific groups. Nonetheless, his work resonates with those skeptical of centralized power and its role in shaping global events. So, just briefly, his sources, he sources the shit out of everything. I mean, order this book, join the Forbidden Book Society, decide for yourself, but he cites the hell out of everything. Like in the old fashioned way too. I really like it. Like, instead of putting all those sources at the back of the book, he puts like each source on a piece of information. And he says that 30 years of research to write this book in the British Museum, which is he calls the finest of information in the world, because there was a time where the sun never set in the United Kingdom. So like they just harvested all the information from all the libraries or archives from every country that they pillaged and invaded. All right, so guys, that took a turn. That was fun though. Let me know what you think in the comment section. That got a little crazy. So much shit to talk about. I think that people that we don't even know about are making things happen right now, whether it's this crazy LGBT stuff, trans bathrooms and everything, or us provoking Russia to use nuclear weapons. I think that there's bigger forces at play behind all of it. And that is what we talk about here, because we don't like to be sheep. At least I don't know about you, but I don't like to strongly believe in something that ends up being completely wrong, that somebody manipulated me into believing in. That pisses me off more than anything. So if you don't want to be in that position either, you're in the right place, and check out the Forbidden Book Society, because we put all of that front and center. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you later. Peace. Oh, and follow me on X.